What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones. And coming up on today's episode, we'll hear from owner and CEO Greg Penner, head coach Sean Payton, and general manager George Paton as they all held their end-of-the-season press conferences. Plus, Phil Milani joins the show. All that and more coming up. It was a busy day here at the Denver Broncos team headquarters as owner and CEO Greg Penner, head coach Sean Payton, and general manager George Paton all addressed the media for their end-of-the-season press conferences. Owner and CEO Greg Penner opened up his press conference today, giving his evaluation of the season.
First of all, I thought we took a big step forward this year. I was encouraged by what I saw. Proud of the resilience that the players showed, as well as the leadership of Sean and George and the whole staff. With that said, we understand the championship standard that we have here, and both for the organization and our fans' expectations. This is a proud franchise, and we grade ourselves by our winning record, and this year we didn't meet our expectations. You know, I think back to when we were 1-5. I'm having sleepless nights and thinking, you know, is this season a bust? And Sean came into my office a couple days after the Kansas City game and had the Detroit Lions schedule and said, you know what, I think we can be this year's Detroit Lions and bounce back from this. I chuckled a little bit, and the next 5 games were really thrilling and exciting for us as owners, and I'm sure for our fans as well. Young players stepped up during that period of time. Our vets, our defense had a resurgence. Special teams became one of the best in the NFL. So then you go to Christmas morning and you wake up after the game the night before, you know, with a pit in your stomach, knowing that you let a significant opportunity slip by. And so I want to make sure our fans understand, you know, I get their frustrations. Main message for Broncos country that I would have is we're just as impatient as you are to win here. And we understand we have a lot of work to do this offseason to get better.
Head coach Sean Payton and general manager George Paton added to that, discussing the season from their perspectives.
My appetite's, I think, where it should be is a little bit stronger. And I said this at the start of the season, and it was really a discussion kind of off the record, but I felt like we had a chance, this team had a chance to get into the postseason. And I feel that same way now. So I'm disappointed because of that, and disappointed that I look back on a handful of things I could have done differently and better. And now, make no mistake about it, we finished where our record was, and we could point to a few games that would have gotten us to 9 or 10, but we could have pointed to a few games that got us to 6 real quickly as well. All right? And so that's generally the case each year. And so, yeah, no pass, fail, success, non-success. It is what it is. You know, it just leaves, a taste in your mouth that you look forward to the work. And, you know, again, the tough thing about it is you don't get to erase it next Sunday. Here it is. That's the truth.
I think we took a step. I think I'm encouraged with the progress. We got off to that slow start. I mean, the Miami locker room, that was a tough one. And then you go to Chicago, you're down 28-7, 3-0. I mean, man, that's tough. And then we have another, then we're 1-5. And so the thing I would say about this team is they stuck together, stayed the course. Sean never flinched. You felt in the building we were going to pull out of it. No one had any doubt. And so that's a tribute to Sean and the staff and the team, and then get to 8-7, to have a chance. And then, now we just need to finish. So I think there are a lot of positives. 8-9, is 8-9. And, I think Sean said it, but this is a good locker room. And the guys love ball. And they fought, and again, no pointing fingers.
Plus, Greg Penner went on to give his evaluation of head coach Sean Payton's first season with the Broncos.
I was impressed with how, after the 1-5 start, his leadership to bring us back from that adversity and get in a position to make a playoff push, very impressive. And probably the biggest thing here in terms of how I think about the future and this organization moving forward is that he established a culture here, is establishing a culture here based on performance, excellence, hard work, accountability.
Sean was also asked that and explained what he hopes to improve on for next season.
There's a couple things. Our tight red zone was awful, and so, all right, I got to look closely at, my sequencing and what I'm doing, calling it. Inside what I mean by that is goal to go. We finished near so our red zone numbers are past the 20, how many touchdowns, percentage, et cetera. Our opportunities, I think were decent. I think we were 50-something that measured 9th or 10th. But inside the 10, first and goal to go, that wasn't good enough. Third down, there were a handful of things, and many of you have asked great questions about, hey, your offense. And overall, it was we collectively, starting with me, it wasn't good enough. We didn't take advantage of enough field position opportunities in games. I want to get my eyes fixed, so I call the right play and I don't mess up and call a wrong play on a play that happened one time this year. That was embarrassing. But I think here's the thing. I think it's easier when you get older and more secure with like who you are and what you do. And when you're younger, I think oftentimes you can be very defensive with certain things. The one thing that I know is how to win, and like sometimes it may not be that you got 480 yards, but understanding the strength of your team and then playing to that. And I think one of the challenges that I had this year, all of us collectively, is like, man, how do we match up on the other side? How's this game unfolding? I know some of you had questions about a couple timeouts, but half-yard line, end of the first half against Vegas, I'm calling that timeout again 99 out of 100. Just look at the statistics or field position, balls, and the same one at New England, really. But I would say, man, we have to be great with the details, and obviously, we weren't good enough with the details if there were certain mistakes that were repeating themselves. And so that starts with our teaching, our coaching.
George Paton also detailed where he felt like the team made their biggest strides this year.
Special teams. We've been in the bottom of the league in special teams my first 2 years here. And, it depends on what rankings you look at. If you look at Westhoff's, we're first, but we're probably in the top 5. And so, that was a big emphasis. And really, we've been trying to get there. And give credit to Mike Westhoff, Ben Kowicka, and Chris Banjo, for what they did. We did bring in some players. You got Mims, you got Riley Moss, you got Tremont Smith, but these guys, so really special teams was a big jump. On defense, like Sean, I think, talked about is, I think the defense formed an identity, after, about 6-7 games, physicality, creating turnovers. And so that was huge for our team. And the offense, we were running the ball pretty good. Obviously, late in the year, we didn't. But the offense, the identity was physicality, ball control. We didn't turn it over much. Obviously, we need to get better in both those phases. But, that's where the jump was from prior years.
Plus, head coach Sean Payton was asked about Russell Wilson's future with the organization.
When we get back and we begin this process of looking at our roster, where we select, there's so many things that go into a decision specific to the quarterback, which is significant, obviously. So it's too early at all. I spent half an hour with Russ yesterday, and I told him, I said, look, I don't think it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, but it hasn't been decided relative to what our plans are. And but as soon as we know something that certainly he would be the first to know.
Greg Penner added to that, detailing that it will be a football decision based on winning games.
I wouldn't. I mean, obviously, the financial part of it is a significant component, as in terms of how this works out in the future. But that's not what will drive the decision. The decision, will be driven on what's in the best interest of this football team winning games.
And last but certainly not least, Greg Penner detailed what Broncos fans can be optimistic about for the future of this team.
There's a number of reasons to be optimistic. I mean, one, we improved our win total. I expect that to go up next year. We broke some key streaks. It was great to get the win against the Chiefs. We've got some other humps to get over in the future. We had some young players emerge. Significant improvement in special teams. The medical side, we haven't talked about that much, but we had, last year when we did the end of season, we were really clear we've got to improve that for next year. We'd been one of the most injured teams for the last 5 to 6 seasons. This year we're in the top in a lot of the metrics, so significant improvement there. But the biggest thing is the culture which sets the floor for how we can go from here. And on that front, again, I'm very encouraged. We know we have a lot of work to do to get to where we want to be, and this offseason is going to be a busy one.
Now joining me here in the Broncos podcast studio to take a look at today's news is fellow team reporter Phil Milani. Phil, thanks for joining me.
Sid, a lot to get to today.
A lot to talk about today.
If there's
You're right,
Broncos
Phil.
news, that means that I'm on Broncos Now.
Of course, not our typical Wednesdays anymore,
No.
but happy to have you on regardless.
Thank you very much.
Well, Phil, to me, it felt like the biggest takeaway from today's press conferences was just the fact that everyone was on the same page. Sean, George, Greg, just about kind of what the season looked like and the foundation that was really built this season. Obviously, a lot to work on and a lot to move forward from, but, everyone still was on the same page about the fact that foundation is set. Things are still moving forward here for this team.
That's how I would sort of sum things up. I would say that they were happy with the progress that they made this season.
Yeah.
There was definite improvement shown by this Broncos team, but they would not label it like a successful season because they fell short of their goal,
Right.
And I think that Broncos owner and CEO Greg Penner summed it up well when he sort of had a message to fans and said, look, I'm as impatient as you are.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see winning football here. And I think that that's important to have that where the expectations are really high. You're happy with the progress that's made, but you still know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Sure. And Sean Payton had maybe the line of the whole day where he said something like, he was like foundation. He was like, we've just barely been like, there's heavy construction that's.
Pillars are still being put in.
Yes, exactly.
But I think he was referring to the offense in that situation.
Exactly. Not the whole team, but definitely. I think that you have to acknowledge that they did a lot of good things this year. They won the 5 games in a row, won 8 games for the first time since 2016, beat the Chiefs, which is a big deal, won a road primetime game. Like there were definitely moments to be pleased with, but overall, the Broncos fell short of their goal.
Absolutely, Phil. Yeah, I kind of just told you my main takeaway. So what do you think yours was from the day?
Well, I think that all eyes are sort of on that quarterback position, Sid, and that's going to be sort of the main talk this whole offseason, I think, is just what are the Broncos going to do there? Sean Payton said that he had a half an hour conversation with Russell Wilson on Monday. He said that no decisions have been made there. And really with the entire team, like this coaching staff, they're going to take a little bit of a break here and then return back to do their evaluations for every player on this team, and that includes Russell Wilson. But he said that we're not going to make this a long, drawn-out process with Russell Wilson. We're going to make a decision here. He's going to be the first one to know, which I think is fair. And then that whatever decision they make there, that's going to sort of determine the rest of how the offseason is going to go,
For sure.
We heard from Jarrett Stidham on Monday, and he was like, look, I want to be a starter in this league, and I'm hopeful, and we'll see what happens. So the Broncos have some decisions to make, and I think that that's going to sort of determine where the rest of this thing goes. But I think that it sort of starts at the quarterback's position for the Broncos right now. But they certainly need a lot of things to get better. I mean, Sean Payton was asked directly how he would evaluate his first season here, and he said, "Look, as a head coach, my grading is determined on team success." And so he said he was 8-9. So that sort of tells you how he feels. And he said that he keeps a notebook where he writes down things that he wants to improve on and get better on moving forward. So he knows that he could be better. And I think that overall, this roster, I think George Paton talked about needing to build depth, and he was encouraged by this year's rookie class. Mentioned how Marvin Mims was a Pro Bowler as a returner, thought he could grow into a bigger role in the offensive side. And then he mentioned like Riley Moss, Drew Sanders, some guys that fit into that Jaquan McMillan mold, where as a rookie you don't play that much, but then your next year you can really take off. So he thought maybe there were some candidates for that. And then overall, just building this roster, they'll continue to do that as they head into the offseason here.
Yeah, and the draft's only, a few months away. This is the first time since 2021 that this team has a first-round pick, so that's going to be key as well too, Phil.
Yeah, exactly. And he talked about the depth. He said that good teams build that through the draft. And
right.
so he mentioned that just because of where the financial picture is right now for this Broncos team, probably not going to be big spenders in free agency. So the fact that they have the 12th overall pick, they're going to have to hit on that pick, whatever direction they end up going. And then throughout the course of the entire draft, just building depth. And, this is the second offseason now with Sean Payton. And so you're going to see them continue to mold this team into what Sean Payton likes, and that's why consistency is so important at that head coaching spot, is because year after year, you're continuing to build in the direction of how the coach wants to play. So this is going to be a big offseason. Of course, a decision with Pat Surtain. George Paton spoke so highly of him and said that, they're going to have to get to work here on what they do with him moving forward. So he's eligible for an extension here. So this is going to be a big offseason for this Broncos team.
Well, and, George Paton, he did say that they feel like they're already a step ahead, having all of last offseason with head coach Sean Payton here.
Yeah.
And, both Sean and George talked about that relationship and what they've built over the past year. I know Greg even talked about it too and spoke very highly of the relationship that they've built together.
Yeah, I mean, those three really working together determine the direction how this franchise goes.
Absolutely.
And Sean Payton said over and over how important it is to have the support there from ownership. And, I think that Greg Penner did a really great job today just sort of instilling that the most important thing to ownership is winning football games, And he talked about like waking up on Christmas morning and having that pit in your stomach after the loss to the Patriots. So, this group wants to win. They're dedicated to winning. They've got a passion and a fiery, competitive spirit to get back on the winning side of things. And I think that you got to be encouraged and know that there's some really respected pieces of the puzzle here within the building here. And so they're going to continue to work and evaluate things and move forward here and hopefully build a winning football team.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting to hear Greg in his opening statement, Phil, talk about how, after that 1-5 start, he talked about how he was having sleepless nights. And, head coach Sean Payton, he went into his office and was basically like, look, I'm going to give you the Lions schedule and record from last year. This is what we can do. This is how we can turn this season around, and they did exactly that.
Yeah, sometimes like seeing helps you believe that it's possible to do that, and the Lions certainly were an example for this team. And, the Lions obviously made a huge jump from last year to this year, where they ended up winning their division. And I think that that's where the Broncos, that could be like their next goal here, is not just making the playoffs, but let's contend for the division. That would be a huge step for this team, and continuing to use the Lions as sort of that example of how you can turn things around. And that's been a big part of what this last season was about too, is just sort of flipping the page and instilling that culture and that winning mindset. And I think that they've done that this year, but it just didn't result into playoffs, which this year, that was the goal for this team.
I think lastly, Phil, one of the biggest takeaways I think that we haven't talked about yet is just the optimism for this fan base. I know Greg, he talked a lot about what there is to look forward to and what they're building off of here so that Broncos country can be excited about it too.
Yeah, and I think there's reason to be optimistic about this team. Like sort of the reasons we mentioned there, just that there's people who are dedicated to winning in this building, and there's people who have, with Sean Payton, he's won a Super Bowl before. He knows what it looks like. He knows what it takes to get there. And, he's going to continue to build this team in the direction that he thinks is best in terms of trying to win football games. And, I do think that the sense in the locker room a little bit on Monday was sort of like, we don't know what kind of decisions are going to be made. We know that there's going to be some tough changes. And, the Broncos they're going to continue to move in this direction. And we saw that result in a 5-game winning streak this year when this team, everybody was buying in, playing with that passion, believing in each other, having that confidence. And that sort of fizzled down the stretch of the season there. But I think Zach Allen put it a nice way, is that when it was there, this Broncos team was elite. They beat teams that are in the playoffs. They beat the Chiefs, they beat the Bills, they beat the Browns. They had some big wins. Now it's just in terms of trying to do that consistently, making sure that you're playing with that same type of energy and attitude and mindset, confidence, playing with that every single week. And what that would do in my mind, Sid, was it was translating some of these games that you think the Broncos should win. That'll translate those into actual wins. And I kind of liked what Sean Payton said, where he said, look, it's easy to go back and look and say, hey, we should have beat Washington or should have beat the Jets or should have beat the Patriots. And then all of a sudden you're talking about 10-win season. He said, don't forget, though, that it could have easily been the other way around where, maybe you don't beat the Bills. Maybe you don't beat the Chiefs. Now you're talking about a 6-win season. So he said that those things tend to even out over the course of a season. But overall, the three today, Greg Penner, George Paton, and Sean Payton, they were very honest about sort of where they didn't sugarcoat anything. They acknowledged, look, there's things to be happy about, but there's a lot of work to be done. And I think that sums things up pretty well.
I think so too. Yep. A lot to look forward to this offseason. It's going to be a busy offseason, like you said, Phil. But
yeah, a first-round pick. You got to be excited about that.
I know. I'm excited about that. It's been a while.
Whatever direction they end up going in, that at 12, you're going to get somebody who can be like a Pat Surtain, who's going to come in right away and be a playmaker. And so that's the kind of talent you're talking about, them going to be able to bring in and then sort of revamp this roster and continue to build in the direction that Sean Payton sees fit. And that's a reason for optimism.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, Phil, appreciate you joining the show today.
Thank you very much, Sid. Appreciate it.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. Now that it's the off season, new episodes of Broncos Now will be coming out once a week. So make sure to meet me right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube next week for a new episode. I will see you all then.